Neil, you're on mute.
Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention.
Uh-huh.
All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our emergency board meeting today. We're going to get started. My name is Neil Albert, and I chair the Board of Commissioners. I'm calling this meeting to order. This is an emergency meeting of the District of Columbia Housing Authority being held today, September 17, 2020. This meeting is being held via WebEx video conferencing and can be viewed live via the DCHA website linked to Facebook Live. The time is 9:33 a.m. Just as a reminder to staff and commissioners on the WebEx, if you are not speaking, please ensure you place your devices on mute. I want to thank you in advance for that. In addition, as we've done in the past, if you're interested in asking a question during the presentation or after the presentation, I will ask that you indicate so in the chat function. At this time, I'm going to ask our board secretary to determine a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioner Council?
Present.
Commissioner Strickland?
Present.
Commissioner Slover?
Present.
Commissioner Van Gossary? Commissioner Van Gossary, you're on mute.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Neil Jones?
Present.
Commissioner Talaferro?
Present.
Commissioner Ortiz-Goud?
Here.
Commissioner Forrester? Commissioner Forrester, you're on mute. Thank you. Commissioner Falchecchio
Present.
and Chairman Albert.
Present.
You have 10 commissioners present. You have a quorum.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we're going to go straight into the resolution today, which is Resolution 20-17, which will approve the District of Columbia Housing Authority's operating budget for fiscal year 2020. There were no public comments received on this resolution, and I will now call on Director Garrett and his staff to walk us through the budget. Folks, when we recall at the last meeting, there are a number of issues, questions that were raised about the budget. So, Director Garrett, I'm going to suggest that we address those questions first. And then if people have additional questions or new questions, they can raise it. And you got to unmute yourself, Director Garrett.
I apologize. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take the opportunity just to also state that I did have the opportunity to have a brief conversation with Vice Chairman Council earlier this week, just on if he had any additional questions in reference to the budget itself. And so we'll try to address as many of those today, this morning, as we possibly can. So both Barbara Chen and Natasha Campbell are going to just get us started with just an overview of where we left off last week and try to hit the salient points of your questions. And then we're going to roll into the concern in reference to the $12 million, the remaining $12 million in reserve that was encumbered for the lead effort. And that's going to be done by Alex Morris. So Natasha and Barbara, please share your screen.
Okay. Good morning, Commissioner and Director Gary. I'm going to share the PowerPoint screen first, okay?
Yes.
Can you all see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, Commissioner, Director Gary, and colleagues. To start our today's meeting, our presentation is that we are going to start on some recap on the fiscal year 2021's budget approval, and then we'll go through the approval process. On September 3rd, 2020, we present the fiscal year 2021's budget during the budget symposium, and the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. And we highlighted but in the budget 2021's meeting, we highlight that from the fiscal year 2020's budget for the board approval, it was a $9.1 million deficit. Under the board directive that we promised, we are going to reduce the deficit of the $9.1 million over the next 3 to 5 years. For the proposed fiscal year 2021's budget, operating budget, that we reduced the deficit by $2.6 million from fiscal year 2020. The savings are identified in a few expenses in the utility, in the internet, and the telephone, and the training, and the maintenance and expenses, and the private management company management fees, and also the administrative contract expenses. Saving come up with a $2.6 million saving, reduction in deficit for 2021. We're going to look back during the symposium. The board requests the following information, which was provided to the board on September 9. The board asked the detailed budget, and also what we were going to submit it to HUD, and also a breakdown of the board of commissioners budget and the resident participation funds. And also the board asked us to include the actual expenses for the fiscal year 2019 and the 2020, along with the approved budget. And reconciliation of the budget at the end of fiscal year, every fiscal year, that we, as I pointed out, which is always including proposed, presented to the board during the monthly financial report. The board also asks questions about CARES Act, COVID-19 related expenses, the CARES Act funding, and we are going to come back into the board and present a very thorough, comprehensive to introduce to present the spending in October's meeting. So there are 3 budgets that we are presenting to the board for the board approval on an annual basis. The first one is the operating budget, which we always submitted to the board, have to get submitted to the board and get a board approval by September 30th each year. Then once the board approves the operating budget, we are required to submit it to HUD before the October 1st, the new fiscal year started. So the second budget that we always ask the board approval on an annual basis is our capital fund programs, which is funded by awarded by HUD, by the federal government. This year we submitted the capital funds budget to the board with the annual MTW plan, and it was in July 2020. That's the requirement, is that the MTW plan is required to be approved and submitted to HUD 75 days before each fiscal year. So again, we were submitted and that was approved by the board in July 2020's meetings. This year, the proposed capital fund budget was $21 million. The last category of the capital expenses project, which is funded by the district, by the cities, that we submitted to the district for their approval, and they are approved by DMPET and the council. Depends on the amount of the project, individual project. So if it's under $1 million, DMPET will review and approve. And if it's over $1 million, each individual project is over $1 million, which is going to need to be approved by the council. In this year's fiscal year 2021's budget, that we presented to the board the total revenue of $554,294,005, and total operating expenses is $560,729,433. After the board approval, also included the resolution that we have the phone 52574. It's required to be approved by the board, and once you approve for the amount of $560,729,433. Once the board approves, then we will submit it to her. This slide that we presented to the board during the budget symposium that we highlighted the four category. First is the net tenant rental revenue, which was the decrease from fiscal year 2020. It's mainly due to the COVID-19, the family loss of income, and the family relocated from our public housing properties. And the next, what we addressed is the employee salary and the benefit, which is the increase is due to the need to hire additional 12 police officers. The other line that we highlight is administrative and the general expenses, which is increased from the prior year, is because we also budgeted $2.2 million for COVID-19 related expenses, which is reimbursed by HUD through the CARE Act funding. The last one is we highlight is our housing assistance payment for our federal program. We continue to increase, and the increase is mainly due to the two reasons. First is that DCHA's effort to reduce the concentration of property, so which means that our rent is increased. The second one is that we also will continue to lease more family for the special programs. The very last one that we at the last board meeting and on September 9th, the board requested an update on how the $14.8 million reserve, which was approved in fiscal year 2020's budget to support interim control and extraordinary maintenance. And that board had a question, and Mr. Gary is going to lead the discussion to respond to this request. Mr. Gary, any question?
Thank you, Barbara. We can roll right into the 12.
Okay, I'm going to start my screen, okay?
Okay.
Can we pause to see if there are any questions from commissioners for Barbara?
Can I get one quick question? I'm sorry, I can't type that quick. Is that okay, Neil?
Yeah, but let's just continue to use the chat to indicate that we want to ask a question. It's hard to do it in this forum otherwise. Well, go ahead, Bill.
I just need clarity on the actual amount of money requested from the reserves in the 2020 budget that we passed, because the resolution that's online, and the past resolution that's online for us has a budget of $537,281,000, but the budget that I see in the information you gave us is $522,477,000, and the request from the draw in the budget that we passed from the reserves was $23,860,000. But in these other documents, you're reflecting a different number of 14 million. So I'm just trying to figure out what the actual...
I understand. Commissioner, the one that's in the response to your question that we put it we provided on September 9th. That basically is the $522,477,421. That's our operating total expenses. That in addition to that, we said basically because we provide the 3 years in the I just changed the format due to be consistent. So you have to add the $14.8 million to the expenses. That would make up the numbers that what the board adds. Well, that what we presented and that you approved. It's just that we.
The expense line in the 9/30/2020 operating budget summary that we passed last year calls for $4.8 million transfer reserves for operations,
Mhm.
$4.2 million transfers from reserves, interim control and relocation, and then $14.8 million for interim controls and extraordinary maintenance. That's a total of $23.86 million.
Yes.
Is that not what got transferred?
The $4.8 million transfer for operating and from the reserve for operating and the transfer for the interim control of $4.2 million. Those expenses actually are included in the federal housing assistance payment for federal. Those are kind of revenue side. So if you look at the expenses, because there's no those expenses already included in our housing assistance payment for federal program. The only expenses not included in our in the section of the total expenses, the $522 million was the $14.8 million. If you look at you propose approve the budget, you are going to see the expenses. We just move it down to the bottom. Okay, just show it to you that was approved, that was an expensive, but because for the consistent over the 3 years, because every year we request different things, so I just change the format. If you need, I can just change the format of my presentation, the format, just make it clear. But the total, if you added up the numbers, they are the same.
So finally, just the final question.
Yes.
How much money was How much money was taken out of reserves in the 2020 budget?
Okay. Okay, if you look at the same report, I believe that you have in front of you. So far, we transfer we request as July 31st. For 2020, we close the book as July 31st, 2020. Okay, so for the 10 months of operation, we request to transfer total of $7.5 million for operation, for operating and the interim control for the payment. We request $7.5 million, but we only need to transfer $3.07 million because one of when we in the 2021 the budget we asked the board approval, we based on 135 families were relocated from our public housing property due to the lead pen issue, but we only relocated 115 families. We didn't relocate the 135. So that's why it's a little bit lower.
So Barbara, what is the number?
Number of what?
What's the answer to Bill's question?
The number is that we request the board approved to transfer fund reserve for operation of for the annual 2020. It was for the. Let me share the file. Let me share. I'm sorry. Let me.
I don't need to share the file. I just need to. I'm making notes here, so I'd like to have clarity on the number.
Okay. The annual for fiscal year 2020, we asked the board approval on total transfer from the reserve pay for regular operating and payment. Total we asked the board is $9,056,640.
So we asked for $9.56 million, right?
9.05.
Okay, and how much was actually transferred? I think was those questions.
July 31st, actually, only transferred $3,073,924.
Do you expect any transfers in August and September?
I expect some transfer, but exactly how much we are going to see, we'll present it to you.
Can you give us a ballpark estimate? August is closed, hopefully by now.
We probably is going to ask the board approval for about $270,000 for sure for those families relocated from public housing for the payment.
Well, I don't know why you have to come back to the board. We give you approval to use 9.6 in reserve.
No, I'm not asking the board approval again. We already transfer. I'm saying we already make the transfer. But
So it's going to be about 270,000 for August.
Monthly basis, yes.
What's the 14.8 number? We were talking about that a lot on.
Okay, the $14.8 million was what we the board approved for the whole fiscal year 2020 for the 12 months. And so far, we only spent for this fiscal year 2020 as July 31st. We only paid spent about $2.6 million.
But
That was the question you asked last week, the $12 million unspent reserve.
I get that, but what's the $9,056,000 if that's not the reserve transfer? What's the $14 million?
The $9 million transfer is to cover for our regular ordinary operating deficit and the HUD payment for those family relocated from public housing side.
I get that. I'm sorry, but that goes back to my original question, which was the $23.86 million that was reflected in the 2020 budget that we passed.
Yes.
So that was a combination of both the $14 million that you stated we could utilize for lead and interim controls, plus the approximately $9 million to deal with the deficit amount.
Right, that's my point. So the total amount that we took from reserves is $23.86 million.
Yes, Commissioner. Basically, when we propose a budget, we propose.
But Barbara, before you continue, is that a yes or a no? Did we take $23 million from 23-point-something million from reserves?
Let me frame the question a little differently. Did we approve for you to take $23.86 million from the reserves in the 2020 budget?
Yes, but when we
that's it. Stop. Yes. Okay.
It's okay.
Yes.
All right, because it's been unclear to this point because no one's ever actually said 23.6. It's been 9.5 and 14 point. You got to add them all up.
Yes.
Because what we're trying to get to is what is the removal of money from the reserves, and that was 23.86 million last year, and now we're asking for more, like 6.5. So.
But Bill, there's a distinction. There's an authorization of 23.6. I'm hearing that the utilization was not 23.6. So
Right.
the question that I have is how much of that 23 point blah, blah, blah was utilized and how was it utilized?
Oh, I get that. But I think to this point, we haven't actually heard articulated that $23.86 million number. It's been 9 or 14. No one's added them together for whatever reason.
Oh, I'm sorry, but yes.
So-
That's what I've been asking from the beginning of this conversation. Well, what's the 23.8? And I just haven't.
So the $9 million was to plug the actual budget deficit that we had. This year, we still have a budget deficit, commissioners, and that's where you wanted us to ensure that we were working towards a goal of bringing that budget deficit down by year 23. So
Okay, so stick a pin in that because I still don't. So out of the 23 million universe that we're talking about, Barbara, can you or whoever, as clearly and succinctly as possible, tell us how much of that 23 was used and where it was used?
Okay, we transferred $3.07 million to cover for operating expenses, regular ordinary operating expenses. We
Great.
transferred $2.6 million to cover for the interim control and extraordinary maintenance expenses.
Okay.
So that's as July 31st for 10 months operation. Okay.
Yeah.
23.6 minus those two numbers, the balance has been unspent so far.
Yes, because that's correct.
Great. So my math skills aren't good, but it should be anywhere around 17 to $18 million that we authorize out of that 23 that's unspent.
Yes.
Great. And then my next question, and commissioners, my apologies for monopolizing. My next question is, what do you expect to spend between August and September? Any entity would have some estimate of a spending to the end of the year by now. Do you guys have that sense? Of that remaining 18 million, how much of that do you think you will be spending?
I will answer the question for the operating reserve, the transfer fund for operating reserve. I expect that we are going to transfer around $270,000 for August and September to cover the PUP payment, PUP cost for those
Okay, so
families.
270K.
So total, to individual, together $540,000 in 2 months.
So $500,000 is what you're
Yes.
saying.
And for the interim control expenses that Mr. Gary is going to, and the team is going to show you the very detailed
Yeah,
about.
but before they share the detail, can you tell us what that number is going to look like? They had to. I know they put together the detail to come up with the number. You're the CFO. What is the number?
We are going to spend the remaining the remaining $12 million.
So you're going to spend $12 million in 2 months.
Not by September 30th, because remember COVID-19, we have to put everything delayed.
Right.
The interim
So
control.
I just want to make sure that we're using the right nomenclature here, right? So we're not going to. I don't want you to give the public the sense that DCHA has this fantastic machine that can roll out $12 million in 2 months, right? So
No.
what you're saying is that you're going to encumber. You're going to have contracts in place.
Yes.
Okay. So.
Yes.
Okay, so I will turn it back over to you. Bill, I saw you indicate that you had another question.
No, I'm
Are you just confounded by my confoundment?
my head is spinning, so I'm just trying to figure out. Yeah,
Mr. Chair, you use the proper language, encumbered, and that's where the bulk of the money is encumbered, based on your decision last year to allow us to utilize reserve for the lead initiative. So we would be drawing down on that in the future. As Barbara presented, we haven't been able to draw down on any of the lead initiative money due to COVID-19 because we could not enter units. So that money would remain in place until we complete the full lead interim controls and or abatement within the authority.
but I'm sorry to interrupt, Neil, but last time we heard it was because you were changing course in terms of
Yeah, and it's a combination of both.
versus long-term fixes, and so now
Yes.
different.
It's a combination of no, Commissioner. We haven't. It's a combination of both. We had to shut down due to COVID, and then also in shutting down due to COVID, we have to perform long-term fixes in some cases because of what HUD mandated to us with the full lead abatement of the portfolio. So if you would just give us a moment just to talk about that, some of your questions might be answered at that point in time by the OCP team.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions for Barbara before the OCP team? And I understand the OCP team is now taking over the interim controls. It used to be in the office of the general counsel, so I'm gonna cut them some slack. But any questions for Barbara? Any other questions for Barbara?
Not about this particular issue, but I assume we're going to have more time to talk about other budget issues since it's
Told us to write our questions in the chat. What is the rules?
Oh, Aquarius. Yes, Ms. Gosri, you
So
have the floor.
today I'm trying to follow
Yes,
the rules.
go right ahead, Aquarius. We don't need to pontificate about it. You got the floor.
I wrote mine in the chat.
Yeah, you got it, girl. Go right ahead.
So what I really wanted to know was, what are our operating expenses? Because sometimes I get confused. You're getting me confused from that part where it's laid out. What I've done was looked at other housing authorities and how they do their formats comparison to ours so that it could be self-explanatory.
So Barbara, just give Commissioner Van Gosri the dollar amount of our
Yes.
revenues
Yeah.
and the dollar amount for our expenses.
Yes.
The agency, what, the budget, right? I'm sorry, I'm not really clear.
Our revenues coming in, just give Commissioner Van Gosri what you project our revenues to be,
Okay, sure.
and then what our actual total expenses to be for the agency. That's it.
Right.
Total revenue for fiscal year 2021, we proposed $554,294,005. That's the proposed revenue, projected revenue. The projected total operating expenses is $560,729,433.
And Barbara, we uploaded that information to the board
Yes,
through Diligent.
yes.
And I have a, do we have management fees?
For what?
Do we ever have any management fees based on our projected occupancy levels?
Are you talking about revenue?
Management fees, management fees. I don't know if we do it that way, but do we have management fees that we based on projected occupancy levels? That's like yes or no.
Yes, basically that's a part of the operating. If you look, it's part of the operating subsidy for public housing we receive, but it's included in the total operating subsidies.
And that would be the per unit per month dollar amount.
That's about.
So they calculate, it's already calculated by HUD, Commissioner Van Gosri, into the dollar amount that we receive on an annual basis. A management component is added in already.
And so do we add in bookkeeping fees too? Or that's like yes or no?
No, we don't, because we are MTW agency. So we develop our own. So we are not following the bookkeeping fee, the methodologies.
And our access management fees?
Yes, we only have management fees, yes.
Okay, but what did they budget by? They budget by what? The AMPs or what? What is the access management fees? How are they budget?
We put in general, I think it's all different, but overall probably on average about 10% of the subsidy we receive.
So do we have any access cash? That's yes or no?
Yes, we have a cash access, yes.
Okay.
Is that it, Commissioner Van Gosri?
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Lawan. Commissioner Strickland had a question.
Yep, I'm coming off of mute. This may be for the next group, but I was just trying to figure out if we have those funds encumbered. Have they selected vendors? Are these previous vendors? And when do we plan to see those if that 12 million is being spent?
I'll jump
Right,
in.
we're going to get into that in the next slide, Alex. Just hang on, Alex. Thanks.
Bill, you had another question.
So I was just piggybacking on Aquarius's question about the 2021 budget and the numbers that were just presented.
Mm-hmm.
The $6.4 million overage is then broken down below
Yes.
as 2.8 for operations and 3.6 for interim controls and
That's
relocation.
correct. Mhm.
Where are those where are they in the expense lines? Like, where are they embedded? And are they extraordinary maintenance or is it ordinary maintenance? Because last year you defined it as extraordinary maintenance. So where is that? Is that as a result of the interim controls, which is extraordinary? Or is it just that we're spending $6.4 million more than we bring in?
We spend $6.4 million more than we bring in. Yes. But
So the reserve call this year is not because of extraordinary things,
no,
because of our normal course of business.
the
Correct.
$90 from last year.
You're correct, Commissioner Slover. It's not because of any extraordinary maintenance that we're factoring in. It's only because of the increased HAP cost that's being placed onto the budget.
Well, you call part of it says interim controls, so that's what draws my attention.
Okay, I'm sorry. I put the relocation. That one is for those 115 family relocated from public housing property to pay for their HUD payment. That's for those family due to the left-hand issue with family with children 6 and under. That's for HUD payment. That's not for the extraordinary maintenance. That's for the HUD payments. The 3.6 you referred to you're referring is HUD payment.
That's all happening, not interim control.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Not interim control, but relocation.
Not maintenance, capital expenses, no.
Okay, could you drop off it's just confusing because it said interim control. I apologize.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I will change my description in my. I will do that next time. Okay, when the financial report, I change the narrative. I change the description.
All right.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Bob. I have a question for Barbara and Director Garrett. So what is the long-range plan to reduce your reliance on reserves to fund operations?
So I'm gonna have a conversation about that, and then Natasha Campbell can jump in from as she's representing HR. So, Commissioner, what we did, we still are doing our workforce assessment. What I've also found is that based on COVID-19, it's allowed us to identify possibilities of working remotely and where that can actually reduce additional costs. So we're looking at tangible items using technology based on workforce. Based on the workforce working remotely, in addition to some other opportunities for us to reduce budget and other costs in certain areas. And I don't want to just go straight to personnel as being the main factor, but I think utilizing the work from home component will allow us to reduce even further. We're also looking at extraordinary costs where it's unnecessary. Our maintenance, our fleet maintenance costs will come down based on not using the vehicles during this time frame. So that's an added expense that we can look at reducing over time. Also, some other workforce strategies in how we deal with our HAP component, and that's very important. And we're going to be dealing with that moving forward district-wide. The increase of HAP every single year is what the burden is on the actual budget. And we're confronted with this scenario of keeping HUD's mandate, which they are mandated that we deconcentrate poverty. So that means moving people around the district and dealing with the issue that in some areas within the city, there is a higher cost of living in terms of the rental market. We somehow or another have to figure out how to level that off for our budget because that's the driving force in the deficit every single year. And so we have a team coming on board to help us. We've already identified what we believe the market should be for the agency. The next step will be utilizing our ability to socialize that approach to cap. I don't want to call it cap, but to stabilize our HAP funding and our HAP increases on an annual basis to landlords and to development teams.
So are you saying the major driver of the use of the reserves is the HAP funding, rather?
Yes, sir.
And what percentage of that, just on average over the last 3 to 5 years, what percentage of the reserve utilization has been for HAP purposes?
I have to defer to Barbara on the percentage, but
if you look at actually that was one of the question committee.
Just ballpark.
Barbara, it's just the percentage.
I cannot tell the exactly right now, but it was.
If you can't, you can always get back to us.
Yeah, we can get back to you, Commissioner.
And is there a plan for? So I hear you talking about a number of things that could be done. Is there a plan that would be implemented? And I know we talked about this last year. A plan that would be implemented that would look at all the aspects of pressure on the reserves and strategies for reducing those. Has such a plan been developed?
We're putting it together now because the workforce will be completed probably by the end of this month, workforce analysis. And we're also finishing up the analysis on the HAP contracts and the use of our MTW block grant to increase HAP amounts for residents.
So when do you expect that plan? When do you expect that plan to be finalized and put together, to use your words?
Probably by November, because we'll have that completed, the analysis completed for HAP, and then we'll be able to roll out our strategy and plan to reduce that, and also our strategy and plan for the workforce assessment.
May I suggest that you socialize that plan with the Finance and Audit Committee of the board?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Great. LaJuan had a question. LaJuan's question is, how does our staffing size and payroll compare to like housing authorities?
I think we have other housing authorities have gone through a downsize. housing authorities of our size have downsized to some degree, but they've downsized for other reasons, meaning that they've taken their portfolio and converted it into other financial operational programs, which did not require the personnel anymore. We have not done that. So we still need to date many of the individuals that are working on site and many of the individuals that are working with the agency. Depending upon what type of agency you are and what direction you're traveling in, that actually dictates how many individuals you need on board. And so we're still running basically a conventional public housing authority, with the majority of our units being under Indiana Public Housing. That means that we need to maintain more staff members.
So does that mean we're sort of middle of the pack? Are we staff heavy compared to others?
I think we are probably a little heavy compared to other agencies. I can't give you the number though. I can't give you the exact number that we will be comparing it to, but we may be somewhat heavy. Yes.
Great. And then
I think that the workforce assessment is intended to look at how other housing authorities similar to our staff and make recommendations as to staffing ratio, as to supervisor ratio, and the work that needs to be done. So I think when we get that report, we'll be able to better answer your question.
So I don't want to go too deep into it, Mr. Chair, but what we've been talking about on the workforce assessment is the analysis is what does it take to maintain our conventional public housing stock versus a newer housing stock that another agency of our size may actually have. That factors in also.
So I know this is probably a question on everyone's mind. When is the workforce assessment going to be done and the board see the findings?
We expect to have initial recommendations in October, and we should be able to provide the board with those initial recommendations in October.
Okay, so which is a couple of weeks away. So which committee of this board would see those first?
It technically would be operations.
Great. So Lawan, just make sure that you ask for that as part of your upcoming agenda.
I will. Thank you.
So I hope staff were making notes of the commitments and the timing of those commitments that are being made this morning. There is a history of amnesia for myself. I can't speak for anyone else. So the only way I know how to deal with that is to make note of the promises that are made to the board. So let's, Curtis, do you want me to read your question or you want to read your question? You're on mute.
Okay. Go ahead and read them.
Okay, great. Chris is asking, what are our operating expenses and what, if any, are our component units? And I know and she just asked about the management fee, which you answered. So let's start. What are our operating expenses?
The proposed operating expenses is.
No, I don't know. She's not asking about the total. Can you just tell what are the components of operating expenses?
Oh, okay. Sure. That including, we pretty much separate the employee salary and benefit, our utility expenses, our insurance, and the interest expenses for our the money we borrowed, and the ordinary maintenance and maintenance contract and materials, and the administrative and the criminal expenses, which including other like a management fee, like in the all the other regular operating expenses. And the big one is a housing assistance payment for our federal program, and also housing assistance payment for the district local programs. We pretty much separate into those, let me see, 8 categories.
Thank you. And then what, if any, are our component units?
It's all lumped together. Yes, it's all lumped together. Most of the component units, they don't have the top expenses, but they all have some other, the employee salary and the utility, the insurance. They all carry some operating expenses, but they are all included in the $560 million.
Thank you. Commissioner Slover?
So on that same question, Neil, the component expenses, so before you were saying that the HAP payments were the source of the requirements to go into the reserves. That was the major component. Did I hear that right?
It kind of this for the past the year and the next this year is because of the rate increase so much. If you recall that the one that you asked, one of the response that show you the increase, the HAP payment average increase on a year to year. You saw that on average about 7 and 9%.
Okay, so yeah, it went from 14, 18 in the last 4 years. But if you look at this operating budget summary that you sent us, it breaks it out into the various divisions. Basically the traditional public housing, the housing choice voucher, and then the central office costs. Housing choice voucher program makes $27 million a year. So how is that a draw on the reserves? Because the central office is running at an $18 million deficit, and the traditional public housing is running at a $14 million deficit. So how is additional HAP payments causing a problem for the reserves when it makes $20 million?
Okay, for that one, because I prepared that one, that if you look at the COCC don't have because the internal transaction, so it's kind of would cancel each other. So you don't see the COCC has the management fee we charge it to the program. So that's why the COCC has a huge deficit. So in the HCBP, the public housing, we have a deficit that has been every year.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I'm just saying, I don't know how you can attribute going into reserves because we have to pay more for housing assistance payment when its profits $27 million in that division. So it's not, we can't go into reserves because we have that. We're going into reserves because the other parts are running in the deficit.
Let me put it this way. We are MTW, so all the reserve is in MTW block grant reserve. It's not necessary on the individual department. Let me put, so it's a lump, it's a block. Okay, it's a pool. All the funding.
I get it. I understand it. So you get in $1 and you break it up and you you send it to the various divisions. The housing assistance payments are not causing the problem with the going into reserves. They're just not, because it's making, that division's making $27 million according to the document that you sent me.
It's
so
because
we're going over budget in other divisions.
Because this is an internal document. So the management fee charged from the COCC is not part of HCBP expenses. So we do not have in the HCBP program, what we provided doesn't have the management fee charged by the COCC. So that basically that $27 million is pretty much the COCC, part of the COCC's fees. So you don't see
take the $19 million to the COCC and deduct it from the 27, and you're still up.
But
I
understand.
Yes, that it's not just an overage of management, and that we have because 2 years ago we hired a company to do a strategic plan and do a workforce assessment, and for whatever reason we didn't get the work, and here we are 2 years later, still waiting for something that, and we keep suggesting that we need that information before we can right size it, so we can get this budget under control, and so it gets a little frustrating after you're hearing the same thing, and so I just don't understand how the housing assistance payment overages can be causing this problem based on what I'm looking at in front of me, just numbers.
Yeah, what number? What are you looking at?
So there was a thing that was loaded into Diligent which broke out the 2021 budget.
Meaning today? I mean for this meeting?
No, before the September 9th meeting.
Got it.
It broke it out into the three base major categories of the agency, which is traditional public, housing choice voucher, and then the central office. Those are the three major, divisions. And so it broke it out into what those division cost. It breaks out salaries and benefits, utilities, insurance, all the expense lines are broken out and delivered to the various divisions. And then at the bottom, it shows what's left over or what the overage was. And if you look at it,
Mhm.
you know, housing choice voucher thing, that it assigns salaries and utilities and everything to them. And they come out at $27 million in the positive. And then the central office comes out at $18.9 million in deficit.
Commissioner,
And
let me say this. Like I said, as an MTW agency, had allowed MTW COCC to transfer part of the payment to pay for COCC the cost.
I don't think that part. I'm not suggesting that's not the case. I'm just saying what's triggered this is the housing assistant payment is what's causing us to go into reserves. And I would suggest to you that it doesn't look like that on paper. What looks like that on paper is that these other divisions are costing a lot more money, and therefore that's why we need to go into reserves. And so that's my only point I'm trying to make. You know, look, I look at the, you know, the expense lines that you gave us. You were talking, Mr. Guerra was talking about like remote work and everything. I mean, it looks like $1.9 million is attributed to running 1133 North Capitol for utilities and expenses.
Well, that's the hours, but that depends on all, we provide all the service to all the departments, so that's part of it's just overhead, supposed to charge it to the individual department, which in this presentation, we did separate them. So how about this, Commissioner? Let me update that one. I right now understand your concern. Let me update that one and show you a true kind of the true pictures. I know what you are asking, but let me do it that way. And can I follow up with that one?
That's great.
I can do that. I can definitely do that.
I just wish that was the kind of information that we could get provided on a regular basis, not these humongous numbers that we then get broken out and see that, you know, we have $77 million in salary and benefits, but we also have $5.1 million in administrative contracts. It's in general operation costs, which is another $5 million in people costs, which actually puts us into $82 million. And so all of this information is necessary for, at least for me, to understand whether this budget makes sense or not, and if the agency is running efficiently or not. This is the only opportunity that we get to weigh into this. And so that's why it's important for us to understand what these numbers, what the makeup of these actual numbers is important. And if you see year after year deficits, you know, you start getting concerned.
Barbara, do you provide that detail in the Finance Committee report, Finance Committee meetings?
No, that's what I'm going to propose. I will meet with the Commissioner Council to kind of, in the future, we will provide, see how detailed the Commissioner is asking, and we will provide, the data are there. So I will just provide whatever based on the request. How about that? I will discuss this with Commissioner Council, and we will present all the requested detailed information in the future meeting, in the financial reports. How about that?
But this goes into the category of deja vu. I mean, I feel like we asked for this in years past, and we don't get it. It's very simple. Numbers exist.
The one thing I pointed out, commissioners, and I think I said this last week also in reference to the budget, was prior to 2017, I believe the budget was being plugged without you knowing it. So I apologize that we've brought it to the forefront that there is an actual deficit, and you've been running a deficit for a period of time. Even if members of the Board of Commissioners weren't aware of it, we brought it to the surface and forefront now, so that we can figure out a way to deal with it. And that was our purpose of doing that last year. And that's going to be a continued operational standard, that we're going to be as transparent as we possibly can until we get this budget down to balanced without having to use a deficit. So Barbara, what I would suggest is for Commissioner Slover, you use the same reporting method that you use for me, and you know what, for the Audit and Finance Committee, I apologize. That's where it should go. That you use the same method of identifying the HAP component that you shared with me and that we sat down and went over. Share that with the Audit and Finance Committee also.
Great.
One more question. And my last question is, what happened to the money? What happened to the money that the DC Council gave for the credit counseling classes back in October of 2019. And if you don't know that answer yet, you can just give it to us in writing.
Commissioner,
The council gave us some money in 2019, and it was in reference for credit counseling classes.
Commissioner Van
Commissioner,
Gaal, we'll write out a report for you in reference to that. We'll write out a report of the use of the funding for you because the program has gotten underway, and we can write up a quarterly for you.
Okay.
Great.
Okay.
So I just want to ask for some additional follow-up since we're doing follow-ups.
Yes,
So during the recent insurance discussion, the board was promised a list of the entities and the board members of each entity that the insurance would cover. I'm not sure that list was sent to us as yet. So I don't know who's responsible for following up, but we'd love to see that.
Right,
Mr. Chair, I saw that question. I don't recall that issue being brought up, but irrespective, the OGC is working on it and should be able to provide that information shortly.
Great. Mr. Talafaro has a question.
Mr. Albert.
Yes, sir.
This is Commissioner Talafaro. The question I don't understand about the budget, I'm looking at it. Why they can't break it down? There are other government grants, like what? Then you got other revenue, like what? You got other revenue, like what? You need to break it down in detail.
You uploaded that, Barbara, correct?
Yeah, we did. It's in the end, the follow-up question, the response, we separate already. We have the DC government, we separate by the public safety grant and the DC, the administrative fee revenue. We did.
So Commissioner Talafaro, we did send that over and updated as requested by the board.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to recommend. And, so a lot of this detail. So we have a committee structure on our board where every commissioner is invited to participate in every committee. The expectation is that those committees will get into the minutia, the detail, the dissection of all the data coming from the various departments. So this is really helpful. This conference is really helpful in helping to structure what some of those committee discussions should look like, particularly the Finance and Audit Committee, which meets quarterly, Ken, or?
We meet quarterly.
It was quarterly, but we're going back to monthly.
Yeah, I think for something like as important as the finances, you need to meet more than quarterly. So thanks for doing that. All right, so I know Tyrone has teed up OCP to talk about the interim controls and how those funds were used. So who's going to be presenting that?
I'm going to get us started, commissioners, and then Alex and the OCP team are going to take it from there. So Alex is going to share his screen.
And so Tyrone, before Mr. Director, before they share their screen, just so that all of our commissioners have an understanding as to sort of who is responsible for following up with the board after board meetings, how quickly can we expect follow-up actions? So on other boards that I sit on, the meeting is hardly over when a follow-up email is sent. But there is really information is sent on a timely basis so people can digest it, so they can ask questions, they can ask follow-up at subsequent board meetings. Is there a point person that we should be looking to? And how quickly should we be expecting follow-up to our inquiries and requests?
Well, Alethea is responsible for making sure that everyone responds appropriately to your requests and things that come up. The system that we had been using obviously needs to be, I think we were using about a week and a half or so. We would follow up to everyone. If we need to expedite and move that timeline down, meaning shorter time frame, we can try to do that with responses from everyone. So within 5 days of a board meeting, if you want it to be shorter, we can work towards that goal.
Yeah, as soon as possible.
Okay, so can we start at least within 5 business days after the board meeting? It may require some collaboration between departments sometimes to make sure whatever we're providing to you is accurate and appropriate.
Well, I just want to make sure that there's there's someone who is responsible for chronicling.
Alethea is. Alethea McNair is responsible for chronicling everything for us, and then we respond based on her emails to us for information to get back to you.
Okay. It would also be helpful that if commissioners, when commissioners review the information that's posted for the board meetings, that they provide to Alethea the questions that they'd like to be responded to in advance. They will lead to some more efficiency in these board meetings. But on other boards that I sit on, the material is provided in advance, and you guys do a really good job of doing that, or getting much better at doing that, which gives the commissioners an opportunity to review and send questions in advance so that the team could be prepared. So, all right, so we're going to turn it over to Alex or Tyrone.
Yes,
Okay.
Tyrone, and then
Yes,
me.
I'm gonna roll us in and get us started, commissioners. Just hit the first one, Alex, for us. The first slide, please.
Yeah, it's my computer is running slow the last
Okay. So commissioners, when I came on board, remember where we were. We were being, I had one of my initial meetings when I first came on board in 2017 was dealing with the HUD field office in reference to lead certifications for all of our properties. This had been going on for a period of time where HUD was asking for certifications, and we were at that time, previously to 2017, unable to produce the documents. And there was no formal waiver agreement or anything like that presented to us, which allowed us not to respond. I made the executive decision that in order to respond to HUD appropriately, we were just going to do an environmental assessment all over again. That was going to be the easiest way to handle it. So in the fall of 2017, that's what we did. We moved into spring of 2018, where we started to have discussions not only with HUD officials, but also we had discussions internally and started to conduct lead inspections. We started the environmental inspections in 2018 of all of the units in the portfolio for environmental issues and also in issues of lead. Now, remember, this was at the same time that NYCHA was going through their particular issue with the lead situation in New York. One thing that I was put in a awkward position, commissioners, was that I could not sign off of any certifications given to me by HUD until we had submitted full documentation that all of our properties had been lead certified. From that end, we went into and started to create a lead abatement program that would be accepted by HUD. And from that HUD program, we received response from HUD stating that within 5 years, we would have to abate all of the properties. Now, we're not talking about interim controls. We're talking about full abatement of all the properties within the portfolio of lead. We were still doing interim controls because, remember, we needed to go into units immediately to have those certifications done, especially where we had where there were other units and we had children in those particular units. We needed to do all of those work orders or relocate those residents to other units. HUD then approved our plan in November 2019. And what we tried to do, commissioners, and I need you to know, is that when HUD first sent their original letter dated in spring of 2019, where they stated we would need 5 years or take 5 years to fully abate, what I tried to do was push back and state that we were doing a transformation plan, which was going to address all of the issues within the entire portfolio, and would they allow for a waiver? HUD pushed back and said no. From them saying no, we started to perform the interim controls, and that's what Alex and the OCP team are going to go into. So in spring of 2020, we began interim controls and started moving forward with all of those initiatives. But we were interrupted by COVID. Unfortunately, because some situations we can't go directly into a unit right now. Once that gets lifted, we will get back onto the use of the funding in order to make sure that interim controls and/or abatement is actually performed. In my mind, when you dedicated that source of reserve source last year towards the lead initiative, it was for lead and extraordinary maintenance. And for me, that encumbers that money, meaning that money cannot be utilized for anything other than lead, interim controls, and/or abatement at within the portfolio.
Next.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
So this is just no waivers were granted, as I stated by HUD. We had to do, even though we had to do a lead assessment action plan for HUD, they did not give us a reprieve. They did not push back the time frame. We still have to abate no later than 2024 of all the properties. They did not give us any additional funding, although we did apply for a lead grant and received $1 million from that lead grant. That was the only federal assistance that we actually received, although we did ask, just as NYCHA asked, for additional funding from HUD. HUD gave the funding to NYCHA, not to DCHA. And then there you see that HUD requested a 5-year plan for us, which puts us in 2024. Thanks, Alex. So here we go. Our goals have not changed. We faced this crisis head on in 2017, brought it to your attention, brought it to the attention of the public. Goals are still to protect the health and safety of the residents. That's first. To also mitigate as much risk and liability on behalf of DCHA, meaning that where we need to get into units and what we need to do to prevent any health concerns or liability to DCHA, that's what we're doing. And also we're trying at the same time to be as prudent as we possibly can with the funding that you have given to us, because, and that is of the public dollar, because one thing we do know is that we do not want to be exorbitant and we want to be fiscally sound and fiscally responsible in how we spend the money, because then if need be, we can redirect it to other issues that we may have with our portfolio, within the portfolio in terms of capital initiatives or other things. We've done over 5,000 visual inspections and we categorize the properties between Department of OCP, PMO, and OGC, and we started the environmental controls. Started the environment controls and closed out all of the environmental work orders. Now remember, environmental work orders were mold and mildew or any infestations that we might have had at that particular time that were still open. We used, and I don't know, Alex, if you want to jump in, or you or John right now, but we have used HUD guidance in our initial assessment of the properties. But then in meeting with HUD, it required third-party assessments that we hired and got reports from. And then we went back to HUD with our guidance after they read our report of exactly what our risk assessment, we thought our risk assessment would be. They asked us to do a second risk assessment, and we worked on that. And HUD actually identified that in some cases, we might have been too conservative. And what I mean by conservative is that when we saw one component in a unit, we assumed that all of the components in that unit had lead. And that it was also a basis for establishing our estimated cost. What we wanted to do, again, was go ahead and attempt to deflate the cost and protect the reserves as best as we can. So we've gone through, we've done actual cost assessments. We're moving forward as a result of the refined work estimates that we have and scopes of work. And we're trying, again, to protect the reserves as much as we possibly can. Total costs have actually come down, allowing us to do more with less. But I do caution you, and I caution my team, is let's not get too overzealous in terms of what we've encumbered, the dollar amount that we've encumbered, because it also includes relocation of residents. And there are some unknown factors of inflation that we might encounter. Also, we have to keep in mind, we still have to fully abate. And abating does more than requires more than just an interim control measure.
Thank you, Director Garrett. I'll take it from here. So just to define the terms, in the initial lead assessment, there are 4 categories of findings in the lead assessment. The least risk, of course, is on the left, no hazard. And that's when the assessment team goes in and does their testing and they detect no known hazards within the unit. No further testing is required, and no settled dust or other lead-based hazards are found to exist within the unit. So on those properties, we are considered to be deemed compliant. The next level is lead dust. Lead dust can come from the inside of the unit. It can come off of surfaces and land on surfaces. but it also can come from outside, from components outside, or even off of our property, and people can bring it in on shoes or hands or whatever. The mitigation strategy for lead dust existence is having a certified contractor clean the lead dust components in a certified manner, and then a lead wipe test is performed before the subsequent reoccupancy of the unit, but at that point, the unit is deemed to be compliant. The next level is interim control, which interim control is a non-permanent mitigation strategy. It's based on encapsulation of the risk through painting or other covering of the hazard so that the hazard can't be accessed by hands or any human contact. It requires risk assessments be reported every 2 years with annual visual inspections. The reason for that is, of course, because paint, which is the standard way of handling interim controls, can come off of a wall. You can paint a wall, and either due to moisture migration or anything else, abrasion or abuse, that paint surface can be broken, and then the underlying surface that's containing the lead component can be exposed. So you have to do visual inspections, make sure that the integrity of that surface is good, and it has to be done every year. And then the final category is abatement. Abatement means the lead is either removed or fully encapsulated in a more permanent way. And this could entail anything up to and including the removal of the lead-based paint and the underlying substrate on which it exists, and replacement of that component, removal of any dust, and encapsulation. And if encapsulation is used as part of the mitigation strategy through abatement, biannual testing is required to ensure that the encapsulation is, the integrity of it is maintained. The next slide, just give you a brief overview. This was the sort of initial findings, and the properties marked in red have already been addressed through our activities. So, for example, there were no hazards found in 1,308 units at the properties listed in the dark blue. At the bottom left, dust only was encountered in 505 units at the 5 properties listed. At the top of the slide on the center right, interim controls were the recommendation strategy for 3,167 units, and abatement has been recommended for 1,959 units. And everything in red has already been addressed through the measures that have been described in this slide. In 2020, we did roll out spending in 2020 off of the $14.8 million reserve. This is how that funding was deployed. The properties on the left-hand side of the screen are the properties in which work activities were completed. And the amounts of money by category: risk assessment, relocation expenses, mold remediation, painting and plastering, interim controls, and all the indirect associated costs, the overhead costs, are all factored in there, and those add up to just over $2.6 million. Our allocation plan for the remaining $12.2 million of reserves is as shown in this slide, and you can see that there are properties listed. These are the properties that were next on the list, and these are budgeted amounts for each of those properties. As Director Garrett said, we are looking to mitigate the risk, protect the health and safety of the residents, but do it in a financially prudent way. And so these budget estimates, we are hoping we can bring them down through prudent measures to assess the risk and assess the actual components necessary. And we're going to make sure that when we contract these, that we maintain at or below that 12.19 million at the bottom. So in summary, our goals, as Director Garrett said, are to protect the health and safety of our residents, mitigate risk to DCHA, and use prudent fiscal measures to be good stewards of the public dollar. We'll take your questions. Thank you.
Question. What role, if any, will the city have with new communities, with new communities? Like on that list, I saw Lincoln Heights, which is a new community. And I also in that question want to know whether or not the city gives us any money whatsoever when it comes to the maintenance or abatement or anything that deals with new communities.
The city did give, yes, we heard you. The city did give us money for one particular property, Park Morton, and if you'd like any further detail on that, we have our staff available to describe, or if Mr. Garrett would like to describe the process that was done at Park Morton.
Oh, you can just give it to all of us in writing.
Okay, we can do that.
Any
Evans
additional
Road.
questions?
Evans Road, is Evans Road still an able community, or has it been clarified to just be a public housing community now? What is it?
Elvins Road, I believe, does somebody know specific? I believe it's still an able community as of right now. Anybody else?
That is correct.
And Sursum Quarter, the turnkey, what is its status?
The demolition approval we received demolition approval for Sursum Turnkey and for Sibley Townhomes. And we're in the process of doing relocation there.
Well, right now, my concern would be, because Sibley Townhomes have a resident council, but the turnkey has a resident council. However, her health is not that good, and her vice president doesn't have that much strength. So who's their navigator? Well, you can just give it to me.
I can get you the navigator. I don't know the navigator off the top of my head, Mr. Williams.
But my concern right now is the turnkey, making sure that the turnkey have adequate leadership guiding them through this, through their situation. Even if you reach out to Northwest One and let someone in Northwest One, and if you don't, I know I will, to make sure that the turnkey do not get caught up in some other type of politics, because Northwest One is a very strong community.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have a self-interest in it. And my self-interest is I hung in them hoods, so I know them well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Slover?
You're muted. Sorry, you're muted.
Then you're mute.
Thanks. So I appreciate the presentation. So the confusion for me remains in the sort of the way the budget's presented to us from when we passed it in 2020 to the presentation given to us September 3rd, which doesn't reflect the $14.8 million that we're talking about, because it just shows the $9 million. So where is the $14 million in the 2020 budget? Can you pull up the September 3rd presentation to the board that shows side by side 2021 and 2020? Because the $14 million is not reflected in there.
Commissioner, that was at that time because we will compare the 21 and 2020's budget, because we didn't propose any of the extraordinary, because we knew that we were going to continue to use the $14.8 million. We are not asking additional new funding, so we didn't include it, but it was approved in 2020, yes. We just for presentation that we want to show you side by side the comparison.
So what was the approved budget for 2020?
That including the $14.8 million. If you look at the
approved budget number?
You did.
What was the approved budget number for 2020?
Okay, I have that. The 2020's budget, the total. The 2020 total approved the budget, okay, was $537,281,146. That including the $14.8 million.
So when you showed us the side-by-side budgets for 2020 and 2021, you took out the $14.8 million, but that's.
I apologize, but a lot of the purpose when we did during the symposium, we were trying to show you what we were asking your approval this for fiscal year 2021, since we are not asking for extraordinary. So that's why it was that was just kind of want to have a comparison, the same type of activity expenses. Okay, but yes, the board did approve our fiscal year 2020's budget as the $537 million, which including the $14.8 million.
So how much money has been taken out of reserves in the last 3 years?
I have to run the number.
It's over $30 million, if assuming we approve this budget.
We ask your approval, yes, but we have not spent that. You know, the 12 million that we have not spent it. Yes, we
I
did.
get it, but I'm trying to get to the reserves issue, which is the reserve numbers stuck at 60 to 65 million dollars for 3 years, and yet now I'm hearing we've taken out $30 million. So I don't know how the reserve number remains where it
The
is.
$63 million reserve is current. I'm not saying it's as not this fiscal year 2020 after we spend the $12 million. Yeah, that's the number that we started. I have to go back, but the $63 million is this year. It's not the 3 years ago. No, the $63 million is what we currently have in our bank account.
So 3 years ago, I could extrapolate that we had 90 million.
Well, we didn't have the huge deficit the past 2 years.
But I we've go ahead, Barbara.
Huh?
Go ahead, Barbara and Natasha.
I think if the commissioner is asking for what we have drawn down out of the reserve since 2017 to provide accurate information, we can give that to you after the meeting. But I think based on this discussion, we want to make sure we give you the exact number.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Work on that. Yeah, I work on the report, provide it to you. Okay.
But I also think that when the budget was passed last year, we provided you with what was in the reserves at that time in the 90-day plan drawdown report that was submitted to the board. We also included that there as well.
Can you tell us what the number was?
If you indulge us for a second.
Let me work on that one. I give you the reserve now. The position of our reserve every year since 2017. How about that?
That would be great.
Okay.
The reserve.
I'll work on it probably not by at the end of today. I should be able to have that the data, the information for you. Okay.
The information that was provided to you back in May reflected that the reserve had the 63 million, similar to what was reported here today. The numbers that you're asking for FY19 and FY18, we can provide that to you after this meeting. But it is consistent with what was reported earlier this year and what is being reported now.
Great. Any other questions?
I have some general questions, but not about the presentation that we just saw.
General questions on the budget or general questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go through that so we can get to a vote? There are some commissioners that have to hop off.
In the capital fund breakdown of $21.26 million, can someone explain to me the $1 million that we keep taking out for RAD out of the capital budget and why that money's coming out of the capital budget?
What document are you referring to, Commissioner?
Commissioner, that's what we budgeted for any of the red conversion. We always want to make some capital improvement on the properties.
But it's been in there since 2018. So
every year we do budget. That's what we have been doing. That we at this time, this is a projection. This is an estimate. So you know that we have the 5 property that we are going to convert to red. We also more properties is in the plan to convert it to red. So it's just a projection.
So
when we do a RAD conversion, you don't have the capital stack put together. You're taking some of the money out of the very small amount of money we have to maintain all of our traditional public housing units. You're taking $1 million out of that very small budget to do RAD conversions.
I don't think.
Are we talking about when we're talking about the preparation and the feasibility studies and the pre-development?
I don't know. It just says
Okay.
$1 million RAD program conversion fund.
So I have to ask honestly for that number, Commissioner. That's what comes to mind for me. I would have to defer and get you that dollar, the actual breakdown of how that $1 million is actually utilized for those properties.
Okay.
Okay, I can get that to you. I can get that to you. So Alethea, just make a note of that one.
Great.
Earlier, I'd referenced some costs attributed to what I think is 1133 North Capitol. Can you confirm whether that's true or not? That the utility costs and the administrative ordinary maintenance and operation costs that are assigned to the Housing Choice Voucher Program in the Central attributed to 1133?
I'm sorry, can you say the question again? I'm sorry.
So in the breakdown of the three different divisions, you have attributed utility costs, ordinary maintenance and operation costs to the three divisions. Is it fair to assume that the ones for the Housing Choice Voucher in the central office are attributed to 1133 North Capitol, the operation of that building? So the $120,000 in utilities and the $240,000 in utilities for Housing Choice Voucher in central office, are those for 1133?
Pretty much, yes.
And the $728,000 and the $875,000 in ordinary maintenance and operations, that also for 1133?
We use that one. We base on the head count, the number of employee to do the allocation. That's the total cost for this building. But how we allocate it to a different program, we use that head count, how many employee working on this site. Okay.
So it's for central office for the cost of 1133 North Capitol.
Yes. Yes.
So that's 1.9 million to those two divisions for that.
1.9. Wait, what do you 1.9? Overall, those expenses?
All
Yeah.
four of those numbers is about one.
No, utility, yes. Maintenance, yes. Some of the maintenance are directed to the department. Every department, so it's a combination of allocation and indirect and indirect expenses. So if you want to break down, I can show you the.
I'd love to get a breakdown of that as well.
Okay, sure.
And then the final question would be, is any of this reserve money used to pay for contracts and things? I mean, or is it all used? So the $9 million that you asked for last year, that's just general overages. Again, I want to get clarity on that. So the $9 million is for general overages, and the $14 million was for extraordinary maintenance.
Yes. Yes.
All
right. So it's close to 11. I just want to thank Mr. Garrett and his team for responding to the many questions that were raised last week. Well, I can't remember what day it was, but at our previous board meeting, and the many questions were raised today and answered. I, for one, have a better understanding, particularly of how to reserve. It took us a while to get there. I'd like to encourage my board colleagues to be more involved in the finances of the DC Housing Authority. We have a finance and audit committee that's chaired by Commissioner Ken Council that will be meeting monthly so that you can have answers to all of the questions that you raised today, but continue to hold the team at DCHA accountable for the finances. So at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution 20-17, which will approve the DC District of Columbia Housing Authority budget. Is there such a motion?
Mr. Chair, before you make a motion, I recommend that what we could do as commissioners is send Commissioner Council our questions.
Yes.
To his meetings, and if you cannot attend the meetings, your questions will be read into the minutes and will be answered within a proper time.
That is fantastic. That works. So I think I heard Commissioner Strickland moving it.
Second.
It's seconded by Commissioner Von Gosry. Alicia, could we get a roll call?
Commissioner Strickland? Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Talaferro?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz-Gal. I didn't hear a response. Commissioner Ortiz-Gal. I'll circle back. Commissioner Falchecchia.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Forrester. Commissioner Forrester, are you there? I'll circle back to Forrester. Commissioner Neil Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner Council.
Yes.
Commissioner Von Gossary.
Yes.
Commissioner Slover.
No.
Commissioner Ortiz-Gal.
Yes.
Thank you. And Commissioner Forrester, are you still there? I don't hear a response. Okay, so we have.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm between two calls right now.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you have a total of 8 yes. I'm sorry, and I didn't get Chairman Albert's vote.
Well, thank you for the privilege of voting. I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. So I have 9 yes and 1 no. The resolution is approved.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, commissioners. I really appreciate you sacrificing your morning for this. But thanks again. And we will see you at our next board meeting, which is, Alicia, can you remind me?
It's October 14th, Wednesday, October 14th at 1 p.m.
Great.
Neil, before you go, can we get an update on when the public's going to be allowed to participate in these meetings based on this? That is
At the next
So
board meeting, Commissioner.
Yes, it was. We made a commitment to having it by the next board meeting.
Yes, sir.
Great.
And what is that going to look like exactly? Can you
I don't know what that's going to look like, but I expect that Jose Sousa and Commissioner and Tyrone Garrett will let us know and let the public know long before October 14th.
And the last thing I want to point out is that I think we have a meeting tomorrow of I think a DevMod meeting of some sort. Is that true?
Yes.
I don't see those. I don't see you shaking your head. So maybe it's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we do have one.
It is tomorrow.
I noticed in one of the slides earlier that the money coming in from the city, and it moved back and forth as to how that had to be approved. I noticed in the slide that anything under $1 million has to be approved by DEMPED. I wasn't aware of that. And could we go over that a little bit tomorrow and understand what that looks like and whether that's because that's how the money was delivered to us, whether we're doing that on our own?
No, I think that's how it was delivered from legislation from the budget.
It would because I know it went back and forth, and I didn't know how it.
Yeah, I think that's how it ended up in the budget.
We can clarify. We can clarify for you tomorrow.
If someone could bring that tomorrow and just sort of explain that to us, that would be great.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Our
Thank you.
meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matthew, do you have any questions?
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay. Thanks. Shanita, can you stop the recording?
Sure, give me 1 second. I'm trying to reclaim.
Thanks.